So, welcome everyone to January's Center for Coaching and Organizations Growth Ring Learning event with Jalaal Madyun. Um, I'm just super excited about this. And before I get into being excited about Jalal's topic and visiting with us, I want to tell you a little bit, in case you're new, about CCO. We are a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to making coaching and coaching education accessible to underrepresented populations. We offer free events, we offer paid events, we offer a premier level 1 ICF accredited coaching education program. And we offer, I think one of my favorite things is we offer a wonderful community. So almost everybody on this call has already been in this community for a while. And maybe some are new. Samantha, I'm not sure. You and I don't know each other. You might be a little newer to the community, but we welcome everybody and we hope you'll join us for other events. I do want to tell you that there is an event on March 8th. It is an in-person event in Chanhassen with Helen Buren, and it's a breathwork session that I've been hearing wonderful things about. Anybody do breathwork with Helen? Yeah, I see the smiles and like a really great experience is what I hear. And then April 30th, we have our CCO Summit, Coaching and Organization Summit, and our keynote speaker this time is Damian Goldfarb, who was a president of ICF globally way back in the day, and he has done all sorts of things in coaching education. He runs a coaching supervision program. He is like a deep in the weeds and up in the sky in the possibilities of coaching. There are also executive coaching and organizations information sessions restarting, and most of them will have facilitators who can talk you through what ECHO is about, but also coaching demonstrations. So if you aren't familiar that much with coaching or with coaching education, you'll get a nice, short little deep dive in and all your questions answered. All of our events are on the website under events. And if you haven't already, sign up for our, what we affectionately call our regularish newsletter, because you're kind of not exactly sure when this newsletter is going to come out. So we said regularish fits it, we'll do it. And you'll get information. You'll see what's going on with our current ECHO coaching education cohort, which is rocking it. I know I'm a mentor and I get to hear them coach. Karen's a mentor. She gets to hear them coach. It's just like spectacular to listen to the impact that they're having with their clients. And now I want to switch because we get into juicy stuff here. So today I am delighted to give you probably one of the shorter introductions I do for speakers, because Jalaal is actually going to tell you more about himself and what drew him. I think, I have this imagine on the hilltop, come to coaching leaders, like a calling for him. So he's going to tell you more about his history. But what I want to say is far more personal. Um, I had been given his name by Carla Quinn, who's on this call. We call her Casey, so you might hear Carla or Casey. And she said, you might want to talk to Jalaal, see if he'd be open to doing a growth rings. And I was at the December ICF chapter event. And if all of you are not going to chapter events, highly recommend them. Great networking, great learning, great community. And so I put on my little, I'm introverted. I'm not terribly shy, but I am introverted. And I was going like, I'm going to go up to this guy and I'm going to see if he's willing to talk to me. Well, it was almost, I honestly felt like as I was walking towards him, he was already saying yes. I felt such a profound, grounded presence in this guy that I was a little, frankly, blown away. And it didn't surprise me then when, as we've been talking through this session, and he did say yes before I was even finished making my pitch. He's like, yes, I'll do that. I asked him something else, and this generous soul said, yes, I'll do that. And I was like, oh my God, I should have brought more things to ask for. This is too great. But he told me that one of the biggest things for him is about excuse me, building strong relationships, whether it's individually, collectively, personally, or professionally. because he believes to the bottom of his soul that when people are in strong relationships, the possibilities are endless. The solutions can be found and they can be win-wins for people. So I believe him, and I'm just so delighted he's going to talk to us about how he does this work with leaders. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Jalal and say thank you for saying yes.
Thank you, Bev. I appreciate that introduction. And I'm really happy to be here with everyone and share some of my thoughts, but hopefully get to know you all better. So I appreciate the opportunity and the warm welcome. We'll get right into it. I think just echoing a few things Bev said, I am very much trying to create a welcoming space where people can speak to me easily. And I hope that we can have that throughout the call. So, what I like to say is that I'm prepared, but not rehearsed. So, as we are going through, feel free to interrupt me with questions. I prefer that if I say something and you've got a thought, just hop in and speak up. If you're more comfortable typing into the chat, I'll try to keep an eye on that as well. But I want this to be conversational. I think the time's going to go by fast, but this topic is I'm really passionate about it. In fact, when you talk about high performance, coaching around that is what I chose to base my whole business off of. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll go into talking about this topic of high performance. So a little bit about me. I have worn a lot of hats in my career. I would say most of it has been in the learning and development space, a lot of training, facilitation, public speaking, but I've also done a lot of instructional design where I've looking at the art of how people learn and building things. Large scale needs analysis. I've been at pretty big companies, everything from U.S. Bank to Blue Cross to RSM most recently for 6 years, which is a public accounting firm, but we've got about 18,000 employees, and that really um, drew me towards a lot of what I'm talking about today, helping the leaders there and a lot of the programming I did. So I've done a little bit of everything. And then I would say from a coaching journey standpoint, I probably started in 2013. A friend of a friend was a coach, and we were just on a walk, and she started talking about this coaching stuff. And it really resonated with me, some of the basic principles of, people already have the answers within them. We're here to facilitate a process to unlock their greatness. All of those things appealed to me, and I was looking for something to call myself. So I started my learning journey there. Like I'm a life coach now. That's what I want to start with. And then eventually, that progressed. And this past year, I went and got certified from an ICF perspective, looking to really focus on leadership, executive coaching, even further, because that's where my career has been most recently. And I've honestly done a little bit of that at all times. And so the last 7 months, I founded the Core Connections Leadership Institute and looking at coaching and training for leaders. So just to give you a little bit of uh, background about where my focus is as a coach, and then we'll use a lot of this to guide the session and hopefully you can reflect on, what this might look for like for you as well. But for me, really focused on from an industry perspective. I'm coming from public accounting, so accounting, tax, consulting professionals, financial services. That's my lane. Um, Coming from a bigger firm, now my clients are likely going to be a little smaller than that, so mid-sized companies, but this area of helping them to build high performing teams, I chose that as my focus area for a number of reasons, but it kept kind of recurring with what I was asked to do for organizations, what I feel like leaders struggle with, and where my education has gone. And so that's the tactical part that the business is going to care about, or the people I'm coaching are going to care about. But for me personally, the other piece, strengthening relationships. We talk about my life's purpose, wanting to do good in the world. I really feel like the relationships we build with each other, that is the point. The journey is the destination. Who's along with you for the walk, regardless of where you're walking to, and wanting to bring that into my business, my personal life, and make sure it's prevalent through everything. So, with that said, I want to start off with a question. We can do this in the chat, and if you put something in the chat that's really good, I might ask you to expand on it. But we've got this topic here today of high performance, high performing leaders. So, question being, what do you think enables high performance? If you can put your thoughts around that in the chat. And seeing a couple answers come through now, so some good ones. Trust from Bev and Catherine. Relationships, clear goals and expectations. We've also got excellent communication skills. That's a good one. Psychological safety has been uh, kind of a buzzword more recently, but something that I think is really crucial, really critical. We've got a lot of great answers coming in actually. So having that clarity, growth mindset, sense of belonging, self-awareness. This is good. Yeah, you see in the responses, like we got a lot of variety in 30 seconds, right? But all like very valid. Um, and another one coming in, self-mastery, accountability. So it just goes to show, I think, a couple of things. A lot of these were, um, personally, things like self-awareness, self-mastery, that's one part of the journey. The other part is the environment. So that having honesty, trust, vulnerability, sense of belonging. And then you have the concrete objectives part, clarity, clear goals. So that's a lot um, to focus on, right? So obviously, this is going to be something that for leaders, if you're coaching them, a lot of different ways it could go. It's a long journey to get to trying to do all of those things perfectly. And then as soon as you get it perfect, something in the organization changes, and now you got to refocus on something else, right? And so for me, what I like to do is have a consistent definition that makes things easy. And so, I consulted Google, Webster, whatever you want to call it. I like to look at dictionary definitions, and then I'll pull together something from a few of those that make sense to me. And when I'm communicating with leaders and coaching, talking about high performance, is really about consistent results. So underlining both of those words, consistency, right? Results focus. But then the big piece that I think is overlooked a lot is doing that without unsustainable strain. And so a lot of times leaders can do things in a way that's short-term productive or somewhat productive, but you got to take a look at the whole ecosystem and the impacts around it. So my goal is getting people to get consistent results, but making sure the methods that they use to get there are something that they can sustain long term. So now we'll have a little bit of conversation around this, but I like to call out a few of the common, I'm going to say performance myths, we'll call them. Some of these are held by individuals, sometimes it's the organization pushing it. But when I do coaching, for me right now, pretty much everyone that I coach or try or want to coach, the topic is going to be around performance. How do we get the best out of you as a leader? How do we get the best out of your team? So these things will come up. But what I hear a lot, just starting at the top left, pressure as a method to get the best results. So we need a sense of urgency. We always need to be increasing the bar. We always need to be pushing, pushing, and pushing in order to get the best out of people and hit our targets. And then you got a couple other things that go to, what's possible with people when you talk about performance being all about personal motivation. A lot of times I see it kind of reduced to what this individual just isn't driven. As an example of something you might hear, or high performers are born, not developed, like you either have it or you don't. Um, and then the other side of things is kind of, I would say, control. So if I step back, then performance is going to drop. Like I have to be as involved as I am in doing what I'm doing. Um, Performance problems are always somebody else, right? So if only I had a stronger team or more of this or more of that. And then lastly, just this relationship between culture and performance being trade-offs. So we can worry about the people part of it, the human side, after we, hit our metrics. And so I hear these things a lot in coaching in various forms. And just curious on your end, maybe we'll have a couple of people speak as I was going through these. Have you seen these show up, in your career in any form?
I actually just went to a 2-day leadership meeting at my day job, and they they shared a story about trying to get performance better, and so they did 48-hour sprint or stand-ups with the senior leadership team, and they had to have measurable results within that 48 hours, which if that's like the definition of of urgency and pressure and to go back to your word of sustainable, totally not sustainable. They got the results that they wanted, but I think it's like the opposite of what you were sharing with us here today.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely one of those things where done the right way, like you said, maybe you can get to a certain result, but you got to look at also at what cost and how often should we be doing this as well, if you want to keep things moving. I think that's a really good example. Appreciate it. I'm going to call you Carla because that's what I know.
Either works.
This is
Who else?
Catherine.
Other
I
thoughts?
think one thing I've seen a lot of is managers or leaders who feel like they really have to be the ones pushing the team instead of just give some guidance and let them go, like give them some creativity and room to expand their thinking. And so when they're not seeing something immediately, they assume nothing's happening instead of like the work is kind of happening underneath. So they see their role as to push, push, push. And if they could just stand back a little bit and let it happen, they would get, I think, more sustainable results.
Mm, yeah, that's a really good example too. Like, I heard within it, you didn't use the word, but kind of the term micromanagement comes into mind as well as I gotta know everything that's going on, and that in some ways goes against the stuff we were talking about, like trusting that things are going
Yeah.
to happen. And of course, from a coaching perspective, when you talk about accountability and people having ownership, it's the opposite of what you were doing with coaching, where you kind of teach people to wait for instructions versus be proactive and be creative. Saw another hand up.
I was just going to throw this out there. One of the things I've seen is often middle leaders that are specifically directly dealing with their teams. So they have a team of people that are delivering, right? They oftentimes think that if they tell them, go forth and deliver, that things should magically happen. And I've seen that so many times. And then they're shaking their heads, going, well, why aren't they delivering? I told them to go deliver. Why can't they just figure it out on their own? They forget that there's a whole bunch of different things that go into making a team that can perform, let alone high perform.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's another good point too. A good call out. There's what are the levers that you can pull, and a lot of times the leaders don't realize or have the knowledge of, or never have been exposed to even. Well, these are the things that enable people to go out and perform well. Great call out. Anybody else? I'll do a last call here before we move on.
I'm going to call
Catherine.
out something. Oh,
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Muriel.
oh, okay. So I was just going to call out, and it's something that I just recently experienced with someone yesterday. That the focus is, in fact, what you just stated in terms of it's on the business, it's on the productivity, and I feel like we've lost the human element in terms of how we're leading these teams. And so, as I was even coaching one of our coaches, at some point she got to a point where she said out loud the reason why she's not able to influence her team is because she does not have the relationships. And to me, that was a light bulb moment for her. And I feel like that's foundational, and we need to get back to the people aspect of it. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely. Well said. I can relate to that. Definitely seen that a lot. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just going to say I've seen many of these things throughout my coaching career. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say you can't coach someone into being a high performer. I think there's so much around how. I think every client I've ever had, I think, is willing to develop their team and develop the people around them, but they have, in many cases, no clue where to even begin. So it doesn't come across as black and white as that statement, but it's really, it's just a whole new arena that they've never really stopped to think about, or they didn't have mentors or leaders that they could use as guidelines.
That's a good point. The blueprint, for it is not common knowledge, which I mean, for us, in some ways, if you're coaching around this, it's not a bad thing. That's what you're there to help bring out, and on the training side of things too. But I think you're absolutely right, Dex. What should I be doing? What's
Yeah.
the best example? A lot of it has to be discovered. Okay, great. And then I'll just acknowledge one more point in the chat, like the classic scenario, being promoted into managed positions because you're a high performer, not necessarily know how to be a good manager. That's what sets up a lot of this. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. Thank you all for contributing. Great points. I think we're going to get at a lot of the examples that were brought up. So I'm looking forward to what we have in store for today. But I'll share just a little bit about my personal journey into this space and kind of why I chose to focus on high performance. I think there's a recent statistic that's pointed out to me. It actually might have come from Gallup, but it was 70% of an employee's performance is directly attributed to their relationship with their leader. And that's performance as well as, I think, engagement. 70% of that comes down to, well, what's my relationship like, or what's the support I get from my leader? And for me, that's a lot of responsibility, just thinking about myself as a leader, thinking about the leaders I coach, because I know that a lot of times what happens at work, if it's not going well, it doesn't automatically shut off in terms of impact on you at 5 o'clock. It spills over into what version of you your family might get that evening. Continued stress and other things that pop up, and it kind of spills over into every area of life. And so, as a leader, I wanted to do the best I could to make sure I was doing well at that. And I got lucky to go to a college. We were talking a little bit before the call about me going to school in Storm Lake, Iowa. But that was a great starting point for me because even back then we had a lot of student leadership that we focused on and I was involved in. And I remember in one meeting, we're doing a retrospective. And one of the people, when we got to me giving feedback, he said, Jaleel, when I first met you, I thought you were the worst leader I had ever seen. And now, luckily, this was a retrospective, but because he said, but then we had this event come up. I started to see a little more come out and kind of what you were capable of. But what he was saying is like, your executive board wasn't brought up to speed. I kind of had this loose leadership style. And I'm very lucky to have had that moment because I realize now, years later, having taken all these leadership assessments and things, everything I take, I'm very high scoring in like the visionary, big picture thinking, experimental. When you get down to the details, project management side, the who, what, when, where, how, my brain doesn't like engaging with that. And so, funny enough, the person who gave me that feedback, they went on in their career, they're a project manager, at a large company. So they're very much into the spreadsheet details and dates. But it was a big moment for me because starting the journey of recognizing people need different things. And as a leader, I got to understand my strengths, understand that I was impacting people and what I need to put around me if I'm going to be successful. And so that on top of, I've always been good at the human side of leadership. So the focus on people, easy for me because that's what I care about most, especially when you think about what's happening at work, but then I care about what happens after work. So, if you're living in Minnesota right now, it's very much to me not a business as usual time. And I've been saying that recently. It almost feels weird to do my normal outreach and marketing activities, like, with everything that's happening. Okay, let me send out this email about this time management workshop or whatever it happens to be. It feels insignificant, right? So I'm always thinking, how do I show up for people in the moments that matter? And so that's part of performance, but part of doing good in the world too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my guiding beliefs. I share these whenever I'm working with a client or have a firm that I might think I'm working with. They guide everything that I do. And so for me, we've stated this a couple of times. Number one, I think the quality of your life is going to be directly correlated with the quality of your relationships. So that's what we're focused on. How do we strengthen relationships? Number two, leadership is stepping up in your relationship. So my definition of what does it mean to be a leader, not necessarily a role, your relationships and what they require from you. What are you doing there? And then the last couple I'll go through quick. One, everything is personal. I like to see that when I have a lot of those situations we're talking about where people disregard the human aspect and or deliver news and they want to, I had to do it this way. It's just business. It's nothing personal. Well, everything is personal because you're dealing with people. So always consider that side. And then the last two are more organizational focus. So a leader's role in the organizations is to create the conditions for performance. So I'm going to help you understand that. And then number five, me personally, I want to give talented people interesting problems to solve and then get out of the way. So from a training perspective, usually when I couple that with coaching, I'm going to give you something to solve. It's not going to be, about me. And it also helps with coaching in that relationship too. I want it focused on what problems can we solve for you. And so got a lot of intro stuff out of the way, setting the tone. What I wanted to do for today is really kind of put you in the lens of thinking of yourself first individually from yourself as a leader. We'll go through a couple frameworks and models, and I'll have you just reflect on different areas for you as a leader for a couple of reasons. I think it's one thing to talk about conceptually, like a framework or approach. It's another thing to like, let me actually think about this for myself and go through it. You get different insights. And so we'll go through that, uh, and I'll share some things first, and then we'll go switch to the coach brain and say, now let's just talk about common areas of inquiry, some things to think about here as coaches. How does this relate to what your practice could be, and so forth. Okay. All right. So I've got a couple things here. When I'm focused on coaching folks, I like to think from three lenses about what I'm helping them. So the first piece is just having them understand like the best practices and frameworks, like what does good look like when you talk about high performance. If they don't know that, then we start there. And a lot of times for me, I would say my style, it can get closer to a consultant that uses coaching principles where, if I feel like there isn't a best practice and I'm sharing that, I might want to do some training up front first. And so well, now you know what good looks like, and then we can focus on the next two pieces, which is competency. Like how good am I at this? And then application number three. Well, okay, now I have this specific situation. How does what I've learned and what I know apply to this situation? And then I kind of base my inquiry around that. So for me, I'm thinking as a coach, I know pretty much you can coach anybody on anything, right? That's one of our core things. I think high performance is one of those areas where an assessment is close to mandatory. Not fully, I'm not going to go that far, but for me, we have to start with some type of baseline um, to help them understand their skills, their growth areas. I will also couple this with if there's any specific metrics or things where we're going to look at that says, here's how you're doing today from a business standpoint. Here's what we're going to monitor going forward. I always try to include some of that. So I'm going to work on you, and then we're going to see how it impacts these other areas. So for me, just the two that I chose to have in my toolbox. Number one, I want to have something that's a 360 assessment. So the leadership circle profile, I actually have a lot of respect for this tool. It's from Bob Anderson, one of the founders, Universal Model of Leadership. And I like it because it calls out when we talk about unsustainable strain. The top half of this circle, let me give you 30 seconds. The top half of this circle is what are the habits that say this is what leadership effectiveness looks like, is those creative tendencies. It's things you can do to get results in a sustainable way. And if you got more green on the bottom half, now you're in the zone where you're getting results, but you might burn out, you might burn other people out. And so having a tool that can evaluate that for a leader and then have other people answer the same questions and you can see the difference. How has your leadership been experienced? I think that's a really key question when you talk about coaching on performance is knowing how their leadership is being experienced. Um, Now, the other piece, what we'll use today. So I have my own framework that I use when I coach around performance that I created. So it's called the Core Connections Leadership Framework. And for me, this started because I'll just give you kind of the 30-second version of it. I'll go into the next slide. Um, I had a exposure to a bunch of assessments. I've probably seen 70 assessments or evaluated like 70 assessments when I was at RSM that we might use when I was looking at our strategy. I probably took in 1 year 30 of them just to get a feel for different ones. And when I was there, we picked some to move forward with, but one of the things that stuck out to me is actually none of these are perfect for what we're trying to do, which was get leadership data at scale for our leaders. And I felt the same way when I started coaching for myself, that none of these tools really get at the level of calling out relationships that I want. So the short version of how this developed, I looked at 200 plus competencies in terms of leadership assessments and how leaders are being evaluated, looking for, if we got a close to comprehensive model, what are the areas that it should touch on? And I wanted to separate out that emotional side of being effective as a leader to the strategic side, where you've got both of those focus areas. And then really focus, for me, coming from public accounting, it's an environment where people want to move up. But in order to do that, they really have to have uh, relationships outside of their team and really be good with clients, like a bunch of other things in addition to leading their teams. And so that resulted in these four areas of focus. So are we focused on which relationship, your team, your peers, your clients, or your leader? And are we focused on the emotional side or the strategic side of that relationship and strengthening it so that you're performing better as a leader, your people around you are performing better. And so we're going to use this today just as our kind of reflective lens for ourselves. I'm going to do some more explaining around other performance levers organizationally, but I'm going to stop because I have a internal meter in my head about how long I've been talking and when to pause for questions and just get reactions. So I'll open it up for reactions to anything I've said thus far, as I've kind of been walking through, or different things you've seen, other models, other ways you approach it.
I just wanted to comment on the statement that everything is personal, because I've seen when an employee has a reaction to something that happened or something that's going on, and a leader says, "Well, don't take that so personally." Or I don't, and I've also seen like, "Well, I don't take that personally. You shouldn't take that personally either." And it's deeply personal to that individual. And then what happens as a result of that kind of pushing down those feelings or not recognizing the either commitment, or that there might be something happening against that person's values or whatever is going on there, that's not acknowledged. And so I have seen and witnessed that, and it was really a super challenging moment in time for that individual. So anyway, that stood out to me.
No, I appreciate that. And I like, as soon as I hear that, it immediately makes me curious to ask, like, well, what makes this so, you know, whatever the question is, like, you got a strong reaction to the situation. Like, I want to hear what this person has to say and why they're taking it so personally. Because, like you said, it's always something underneath that's bigger for them. So that's like, it's always a missed opportunity when that doesn't happen. Um, but what you said also made me think of something else, Lynn. So I appreciate it, which is just, you said it's deeply personal, or it was to that personal. And I think just acknowledging that this topic area in general, as a coaching focus, is deeply personal too. Like, if you think about performance, like for some leaders, we're examining, how are you doing? And for some of them, they haven't gotten true feedback yet. This their first time in a row, is a very vulnerable position to be in, to be looking at, am I a good leader or not? And getting yourself willing to accept whatever the answer happens to be. I think that takes a lot of trust building too, as a leader, and acknowledging being in that space. So like, that everything is personal. I have to think as myself, like, this is something that's very personal to this person. It's not just a disc profile that we're going through where there's no right answer. Like, this is more like there's some things, maybe some gaps that we might expose here that we can think about working on. So thank you for that. Other comments?
I put it in the chat, Jalal, but I just want to say there's a simple elegance about this. It just not both the way it's manageable. I feel like if I were going to look at assessing myself, at supporting others, I could make sense of this just so much more easily than I can with so many assessments, whether it's the Hogan disc is relatively accessible. Even strengths has so many layers. And this just seems to hit both the personal and organizational. And then I just love here's with clients, here's with leader, here's peers, here's team. I mean, yeah, 2 thumbs up. I love this.
Well, I appreciate that, Bev. Any other comments in the chat too, saying similar things? Because I'll say that was my goal. I'm gonna just give a quick sidebar. But as I was looking at these 70 assessments, I actually made a spreadsheet and scored them in different areas. And one of them was like ease of understanding, and a lot of them not great. Like they can be scientifically correct, but socially wrong, is what I was saying. Like this is not how people receive information. So one of my goals was simplicity, as well as accuracy. So appreciate that. All right, I'm going to move us forward here and get into another piece. So this, I'll just quickly say. So these are the 8 focus areas. Like this to me is like as a leader wanting to be as effective as possible and looking at relationships to do it. We'll focus on one of these 8 areas in our coaching the most, and then I'll tell you a little bit. Let's help you understand yourself, your traits, and how they're playing into it. And so that's the individual portion of it. But the other side, and this I would say uh, inspired me to to start developing my model when I was looking at organizational factors. So, being a learning and development professional, part of what I was doing was needs analysis, right? So, let's look at the skill gaps, let's look at the root cause of it, and then try to figure out what to do about it. And so, one of the things I do, I teach a course on that now for the U of M and their certificate programs they have. But this model, Thomas Gilbert has this behavioral engineering model, and I saw that pop up a couple of times, and I thought it gave a good language to the organizational factors, how to show leaders what could be impacting performance other than this person just doesn't want it enough. And the things that you can do as a leader, either for your team if you own it, or you can advocate for it from an organizational perspective. So, as a coach, I think if you're looking for something to like Google and get familiar with and use for high performance, I think this behavior engineering model or some variation of it, this is a variation of it. It's a good tool to have in your toolbox in terms of areas of inquiry as a coach to be thinking about how can I, help this leader see the full picture of what's happening. And so I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I'll just give you the high level. So there's the external factors in terms of if performance is not there, what's causing it? A lack of one of these things. It could be a lack of information, like they don't have the goals, the expectations, or the feedback they need. Be a lack of resources. They don't have the materials or the time or the incentives. I've seen where companies want people to do a certain action, but if you look at the bonus structure, like you want them selling more of product one, but you give them a higher commission for product two, things like that. The incentives aren't aligned, all kind of external. And then the internal pieces are more specific to the person or the people and what might be, their limitations. So knowledge and skill gaps, they can need more training, more experience, things like that. Capacity, they might not have the capacity to do the work. So I'll give a couple of examples. So if it's physical, like for example, the job is physically demanding, you have to lift heavy things. Some people may or may not be able to do that. Emotional temperament, like if you're a therapist and you're very empathetic and you're also crying in your sessions, probably not the best fit, right? So capacity is, does this person have the ability to do it? And then lastly is motives. So willingness to do it, just passion, I'm retiring soon. I don't want to do it, all of those types of things. But this is the answer or one of them to, okay, I'm not seeing results. Why is it? Now, for me, I like to simplify this even further and just put it into three areas. So when I'm talking with leaders about, okay, from an organizational standpoint, what's needed, I put it into three buckets, really more aligned to language around as a leader. What should you be doing about this, performance gap or thing you're trying to influence? So performance measures, I'm looking at asking them, okay, are the goals in place? Have you communicated expectations to this person? How you tracking it? Did they get feedback? And then if you gave them good feedback, what are the rewards like? Resource investment. Maybe you need more tools, technology, training, or staffing. You need more people, better fit, or different time allocation. And so I found it just resonates more to frame it this way. And these are three buckets of this is what I'm going to advocate for as a leader, in addition to building that personal relationship with the person. So I'll pause there again and just I'll be curious, maybe even in the chat, like if you've seen a similar model, if you were familiar with that, and then if someone wants to come off mute as we're going through and just kind of talk about reaction, that'd be great too. Samantha, I love what you put in the chat. Tell me what you're paying people for, how and what you're paying people for, and I'll tell you why they're behaving the way they are. I like that.
I'm sorry, something popped into my head while you were talking on the last slide, and that's going through intrinsic motivators with folks. So that's sorry, my brain just does strange things sometimes.
Well, that's where brilliance comes from a lot of the time. So I appreciate that. But yeah, in the chat, maybe even just yes or no, like, or is this talk of behavioral engineering model or something similar? Were you familiar with it already? Okay, and Sheila's saying she sees alignment with the leadership circle's bright model too. Okay, interesting. I'll have to go look at that because I don't know if I even recall seeing that. Okay.
Jalal, I just wanted to call out. I'm driving, which is why I can't type in.
Okay.
I just wanted to say I have not seen it the way you've laid it out, but and not to demean calling it simplistic, but that's the value of it. It's very practical advice, and it just seems like it's something that's easy to digest and execute in, and especially in that coaching environment. So I love how you pulled this together.
I appreciate that. I think the other part too, like as a coach, depending on your style, sometimes I will pull up a slide and we'll go through it, right? You want to have something simple to
Mm-hmm.
show. Other times, if I'm just want to stay in the moment and you're more coaching that way, I only want to remember three things as well, right? To be
Yeah.
thinking about areas that I can probe. So helps with all of that. All right. Any last thoughts, and then we'll get into the fun part.
Oh yeah, throw one more thing out there.
Yeah.
Who here has seen an organization that has enough staffing lately?
Did you
Yeah.
say has enough staffing?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, does that even exist? Has it ever? Great question.
If
Yeah, I
you
think
read
that's
the
one of those
business
constraints.
media, they'd be saying that they're overstaffed. That's why they're doing the layoffs.
Yeah, they're not the ones firefighting after the fact, though, trying to pick up and now have one person do three people's roles, right? So I think that's a great call out because it's one of those constraints that we can assume is going to be part of the puzzle.
I think one of the saddest things is when you've got a tremendous passion fit and these other things aren't aligned, and the burnout factor is so strong. I see that a
Mhm.
lot in the nonprofit organizations that I'm working with, where, it's almost like they're sacrificing themselves for how much they care about the mission and the cause, but these other factors intervene, and it's very, very difficult.
Mm. Oh, that's so true. I've seen that. I've experienced that as well. Like,
Yeah.
I really care about this, but I'm making miracles happen,
Yep.
and when you consider I don't have the tools, the technology, I'm not getting this or that, and there's only so long a person can do that, right? Before they get burnt
Exactly.
out.
Yeah.
We see that a lot in public accounting, and so the burnout is real. And unfortunately, we've normalized it. And some people are defined, and that's how they measure success in terms of the volume of work and the fact that they can do 2 and 3 people's jobs. And of course, leadership doesn't see it as an issue because the work is getting done, but at what cost? So
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'll say like public accounting, another factor too is charging by the hour to clients, right? And so the only way to really make more money is to work more hours, or you could charge more per hour, but that builds a lot into that mentality around burnout too. It's almost built into the business model, and a lot of businesses are like that. All right, I appreciate the thoughts and feedback. I would say we've covered the individual factors. We covered kind of the organizational lens that you can take as well. I do a combination of both when I'm working with leaders. You could do one or the other, depending on what your focus is. For today, we're going to focus on like individually. I want to shift now to think about yourself and kind of trying this on, so to speak. And then we'll just have some discussion around like what insights that prompts for you individually, and we'll shift into from a coach perspective, how do you integrate this? So what I'm going to have you do, I'm actually going to I'll leave this up on the screen, and then also knowing that maybe we have some people that can't see the screen, I might just kind of read through a couple of these items here too. But we're just going to do a self-assessment. We'll do a high level in these 8 focus areas. We'll go through each one of them. And the gist of it is, give yourself a score from 1 to 10. And if you're taking some notes, maybe be prepared to just kind of type the name of what the focus area is and then there's a number so you have that, because 8's a lot to remember. But I would just kind of invite you to think of yourself uh, as a leader, either in your current role, it could be a past role that you want to reflect back on, or an organization that you're a part of where you play some type of leadership role, you work with other people's. But I want you to define it for yourself in relevant terms. And so, especially when we look at the relationship types, we'll go through each level. So, when we think about clients, for public accounting firms, that's clear. If you're in a nonprofit, it could be whoever you're serving. If you're part of a university, it could be students. But think about clients as who do I serve ultimately? And for me, like being a learning and development person, it's the line of business people, or it would have been at that time. So I just wanted to throw that out there too. But as we're going through here, kind of make it, relevant to you. If you've got to squeeze or think about it a certain way to do so, that's fine. But what I'm going to have you do now, we'll start with the emotional side of things. There's 4 areas there, and then we'll go over to the strategic on the next slide. But this first area, just thinking about, from a client perspective, creating rapport, how you might see yourself, like your ability to build those genuine connections, trust-based relationships with your clients, using active listening, connecting authentically, and so forth. That's area number 1. The second one, I won't read these because in general, I don't like when people read to me a lot, but I'll just go through high level. So the second one's going to be strengthening trust. We're down at the leader level now, but earning confidence from your direct leader through being dependable and having integrity. Um, Third level is with peers. So shaping that collaboration through influence and joint problem solving. And then the fourth area is looking at your team now, but how are you facilitating engagement? We have words mentioned like psychological safety, recognizing their contributions, and so forth. So what I'd love for you to do is go ahead and give yourself a score on each one of these 4. Again, you can write the number and then maybe the title. So create rapport, strength, and trust, just so you can keep track. And then when you're done, if you want to do the in Zoom, the react and raise hand, that way I'll know when people are done with these 4, and then I will show you the next one. like we're about halfway there. Seeing another thumb go up. All right, that looks like pretty much everybody. If we need to go back for any one of them, I'm happy to do that. And then we'll go to the next slide. So now we've got four more areas. We're looking at this blue side, strategic. So creating value for your clients, strengthening the vision across the organization, partner with your leader on that, aligning to your leader's vision, leveraging capacity. So looking at the capabilities of other areas across the business and your peers and how do you involve them and have an enterprise perspective. And then with the team, facilitating outcomes. So not the connection side, but actually, driving performance, developing others, organizing around the work. I'll let you read through. And when you're done, if you can do react and raise hand again, that'd be great. It looks like we have 5 people with hands raised so far. Give a few more seconds here. Okay. I'll stay on this slide if you're wrapping up. And what I'll do, so we got just a little bit of reflection. I'll have some reflection questions on the next slide, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started just thinking about that. If you got your hand raised, feel free to put that down. But looking for any insights as you were taking this assessment, like what patterns do you notice? Anything else that stood out to you? If you looked at a particular area, maybe there's one where you feel like this area will be really critical for me, thinking about myself in whatever role you're picturing. This was core to success, or this one, I noticed actually now thinking about it, maybe this one is something I should have focused on. But again, wanting to get reactions to what insights came up, what patterns do you see across here? And I'll have at least 2 or 3 people maybe talk about that, and then we'll move on from there. I see a comment in the chat already from Samantha. So much better at the emotional side. You and me both. Yep. Yeah. Same thing for Tavo. Yeah, this is interesting. I think we got 4 people kind of saying uh the emotional side is stronger. And then Bev, my head went through as well. The question is this a pattern for coaches? Like I'm wondering, like, is there something, obviously we're all drawn to coaching. So maybe there's something in what attracts coaches to the profession in the first place that influences us really focusing on that emotional side more so than the strategic. That could definitely be a pattern. Yeah, is anybody just willing to come off mute and maybe give some color commentary to what they were noticing and just like how is this showing up? Yeah, a couple hands raised. Samantha, go ahead.
So that last piece, what organizational factors have impacted your performance, just hit me right in the face. It was like a punch to the nose, man. So often when I go into an organization and start working with them and I see where their dysfunction lies, I find myself tiptoeing around it sometimes rather than taking the bull by the horns. And in my last job, instead of tiptoeing around it, I took the bull by the horns and it was hard. So I think recognizing that I have a much stronger emotional side, how do I start to leverage that other side more actively in my role is what I think would be really good for me, would really help me grow in my leadership skills.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'll have a reaction to that too, but I'll go ahead and let Karen jump in and with their thoughts.
Yeah, I was thinking of one particular role I had that where all of these things definitely had an influence, and then I realized there's a pattern. So for me, the two areas actually side by side, leverage influence and leverage capacities. I think the emotional piece tends to get in my way where, I don't turn the heat up enough and I'm like too nice. And so not recognizing the power that, the people around me or my team or whatever that might have, um, I don't know that I've ever really maximized it. And I think, how do we think about using our innate talents to apply it to those areas where we have a growth opportunity? So those were the two areas that kind of stuck out. Both of them were lower, definitely lower scored for me, where the others were, relatively high.
Mm, I think that's a great point. Actually, now both of the comments I is kind of bringing something to mind for me. But you said something interesting, which is like using that emotional side, being strong in that as a way to also facilitate some things happening on the other side. I think that's a really good perspective to take, focusing on kind of that strengths-based development because I think it's true as well. Like being good in that emotional side is a strength when you're trying to get things done and things strategically too, and helps with buy-in and relationships. So I really like that part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. A key point to there too, like being a person who's also a little higher on the emotional side. For me, it's how do I collaborate with people who are have different strengths, bring different things to the table. Like, so I'll
Right.
give you a concrete example. Like if I had a large scale project, big project team, one of the things that I know I need is if I'm collaborating across multiple peers and other things, I need a project manager or resource um, that I can tap into so that it's not on me to do that because I know that's not a strength. Or I need
Yeah.
some other person that's really good with doing XYZ and getting their buy-in on taking that piece of it. And so looking at those relationships, I think that also connects back to like the organizational factors. Like what do I need to advocate for?
Right.
Or at a minimum, say, hey, I can do this, or I'm fired up to do this, but I don't have this, this, and this. And because of that, here's what we might run into. Yeah, either give it to me or acknowledge it and consider that in the expectations of what you're asking for from me.
Right.
And I've certainly been in the positions where, I've pushed and pushed and got through, or pushed and pushed and I haven't, and then had to make a decision about, can I continue to move forward in this role in this organization? So thank you both. I think we had some other good commentary in the chat too. There are times, I think there was a question there. How do you work with someone? How do you collaborate with someone who doesn't want to work with you? That kind of stuck out to me. And we can probably have a whole other session on like connecting with people, get into what they value, what their motivations are. But I think that's a really important call out too, and it probably falls on the emotional side of things. Of sometimes there are reasons you need to work together with somebody functionally and strategically. You want to leverage them, but you need to understand that individual. So going back to that point of everything is personal. What exactly is their motivation? What exactly is their hang up? A lot of times those personal things have to be removed, right, before you can really open up that lane for collaboration. Okay, I'm just going to read the chat here, see if there's anything to react to, and if anybody else wants to jump in. Yeah, really good call outs. All right, great. I think what I'm going to do here, I'm going to move us forward. So, first of all, thank you all for putting that hat on, participating that way, I'm going to shift over to the coaching lens, and I'm actually going to speed up some of this last piece so I can leave some time to just talk. So from a coaching perspective, just thinking about areas of inquiry. So there's two buckets that this can fall into. One, you're having an engagement that is coaching about performance or high performance, and you've agreed to that up front. Like for me, that's what it's going to be half the time. I'll put that in writing. This is what we're going to focus on. Other times, it just comes up in conversation where you got someone who mentions stuff that's going on with the team, or who mentions the feedback that they got recently, or whatever it is, and you wind up kind of coaching on performance in the moment, whether or not that was the agreed upon or that's the explicit focus. And so for me, I had a couple areas when I think about it as a coach, stepping away from models for a second, just what are good areas of inquiry. So meaning number one, um, like, okay, why is it important to focus on on performance for this leader? What's possible for them, if they reach their highest level of performance, making sure I know that about the person that I'm coaching. I usually try to get that up front, and it reveals quite a bit. And then you've got, you thinking about the growth model, you've got the reality of like what's working well right now that you might be underestimating is a good question that I thought of, because a lot of times in coaching, what's going wrong. But I also try to shift some of the energy back to a positive focus of how can we take what's going right and make it, into a strength to have it go better. Um, Feedback they've received, making sure that I'm aware of that, they're aware of that, and making meaning out of that too. And then a couple other areas. So there's the pressure and the energy. So a lot of times leaders are under pressure, teams are under pressure. How might they adjust their leadership in response to that pressure? What feels unsustainable right now? Those types of questions come up a lot. Relationships, who do you feel you need to strengthen the relationship with more is a straightforward one. But, other things like what conversations feel like they're tense or avoided, and get into the root cause of those for performance. And then just generally speaking, new possibilities. So trying to get people to open up sometimes, because this area people get entrenched in viewpoints, I would say, when it comes to performance. And so opening them up, like if your next step was an experiment instead of a commitment, then what would you try? Or, if the solution wasn't more effort, what else could it be? Those types of questions open people's minds to, they see a pattern usually, and they've already decided what's true about the entire situation. So as coaches, if you've been coaching, you know that these are common things with any topic, but for performance specifically, I had a couple areas that I want to call out. So um, again, any reactions before I move forward that
Yeah,
resonates?
Jalal, immediately I thought about an executive I'm coaching right now who, for those of you who know positive intelligence, he's got a very strong restless saboteur, a hyperachiever saboteur, and a controller saboteur. And that can really get going when he's under stress. And he does feel like what he's been given to accomplish is totally impossible. He's still going to try to do it. And it was so interesting under that pressure and energy. I think a really key area that he's grasped and allowed himself to see the impact is how do others typically respond to me when I'm under pressure? And then how could I adjust? And his adjustment is that he's working very intentionally to take a moment before he goes into any new meeting to say, what impact do I want my presence to have here? And it's been a pretty much of a game changer for him. Yeah, truly, Samantha. Yeah. And now he's bringing it home, which is really cool. He's like, what do I want to, what kind of impact do I want on my kids when I come home and my beloved wife of many, many years? So, yeah, that really stood out for me. Thanks, Chilla.
Yeah, I like that. That's a powerful question. What type of impact do I want to have? Um, and doing it intentionally, I can imagine that being really, really powerful and a nice reset um, for that leader.
Yeah, I also just really appreciate the the phrasing of pressure and energy. Um, hadn't put it in those words before, but that really resonates with me.
Thank you. All right, let's take one more. Yeah, what resonates? What sticks out?
This is Sheila. I think the who or what tends to absorb the cost when performance dips, that pressure and energy question, really seems relevant with some of the examples you shared earlier and someone that I was working with earlier today as well, in terms of understaffing, high deliverable expectation, burnout. It's like this compounding, and there's collateral damage or collateral expectation that people will adapt, but we can only absorb so much.
Yeah, very true. And yeah, that connects. I also saw a comment in the chat from Samantha. Like, feels like pressure is really high these days. Like under understaffs. That's a key theme, recurring thing. It seems like honestly, the last few years have been more of that. I just feel like even in my personal career, there were moments, and now it feels like more constant. Right, that's something that leaders are dealing with that we're having to help them through.
Now, this is just a little nuance under new possibilities. I think all of us have used some form of if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do? And there's something that I like, frankly, so much better about that first bullet is if it was an experiment versus a commitment. It seems, and maybe this is also pointing to my pattern of being stronger on the emotional stuff. And yes, Samantha, I agree. Experiments are very cool, because what you want to fail, you're going to learn. You want to succeed, you're going to learn. Whatever happens in an experiment, there's learning. But it feels like it's, I keep coming back to the word gentle, like a little gentler invitation, not any less potential for impact, but just a little different than if you knew you couldn't fail. So I really appreciate having that word. And thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. The distinction there. All right, appreciate everyone for chiming in. I want to move this forward because I want to actually just make sure we have time to reflect on like overall, like where do you see this fitting into your coaching? Here's what I would love to hear from you all. I got actually, you know what, go out of order because I'm a presenter. I'm allowed to do that. Let me just do this last piece and then we'll go back. So I'll give a little bit more commentary around like okay this area of focus of coaching around performance. And just some things to think about because I think, you can have whatever tools you want to have in your tool belt, whatever frameworks. Like this is um, a lot of surprises, a lot of constraints you're working around, and just things to think about if you're coaching on this, want to make it a focus or whatever it happens to be. So for me, just a couple of things I've run into. One, leaders being very pressed for time. I would say to meet and implement. But when you talk about like, okay, we're really results focused, but we also want to build relationship. Like a lot of that takes time, and so I've just found that having the right pacing and trying to find what's reasonable for a leader, like a chunk to take away and having some marginal progress, having to be okay with that. Because a lot of times the results are like, let's turn this around in a short time frame. But me as a coach, I'm looking at what's realistic for this leader and what can actually change and how long it takes to develop relationships. It's actually two competing things where one feels really short term, another is longer. Um, Number two, having to outcoach the system. So we talked about I might be working with the individual who may not have any influence over many of those organizational factors. No budget for training, can't buy stuff, don't do anything with the incentives, but they have to work within it. And so just knowing like my coaching agreement might say we're going to look at these metrics and see what happens. But a lot of times coach can do really great with their team, but those other things play a factor, and that's just the reality of it, not having control of it. Um, I just mentioned like the pressure to show improvement in metrics, the mental strain, high pressure situations, coaching through that, obviously that can transfer to you as a coach. A lot of times leaders don't have a clear picture of their blind spot. So I mentioned before, like having a 360 assessment or something else that can bring that out if I'm just getting one lens sometime. And in others, the last one, just some people are wired that they don't want to think deeply about this. And so hopefully you don't have a lot of clients where they were voluntold to be coachees because we know that doesn't work. But there are times where, for whatever reason, from an organizational standpoint, you end up coaching someone who, you can tell is, I just want to feel what I'm feel and know that I'm right is kind of their mind frame. And me being my background psychology in school, I love it. I want to take off the top and I want to know how the gears turn and understand everything about why I do and what I do and why I do it. And then there are other people, even in those classes, like I'm not for this self-examination. Let's just, let's focus on others. And so you do have to, try to screen for that up front, if you can. But I just call these things out because again, I love this area around performance because it can be concrete, but it comes with some, a lot of the built-in constraints that we've talked about already. So looking at the time, we got about 15 minutes here. So what I think I want to do is actually, I want to open up a conversation and again talk about like where do you see this topic of high performance fitting into your coaching? How do your strengths align with coaching well in this area? What are the areas to watch out for? I'm going to open us up to that conversation. And before I do that, though, I've actually got a couple things. I'm just gonna wrap up the follow-up steps, and then we'll basically kind of go into Q&A around that. So, um, I always like to think about how I can add value and then connect with people and build relationships too. So, I've got a QR code on the screen here, direct link to my calendar. If you want to grab 15 minutes with me, grab 30 minutes with me, and talk about like anything we talked about today, integrating this into your practice or other work that you might be doing. Always open to connect and meet with people. The other thing, Bev and I talked about a little bit of like ideas of what will be valuable. If you're interested, like from a leadership assessment standpoint, I mentioned the leadership circle profile. I have my assessment. We just went through the quick self-assessment version, but I have a full-blown assessment in my 8 focus areas that you could take as well. And for either one of those, if you're interested in taking them, I'll send you and give you access to take those, and then I'll do a 30-minute debrief with you for $50 or something like that. So I just wanted to offer that if you wanted to go deeper in assessments and were curious about that. And so that's good through this year, but feel free to reach out to me regarding that. And then I've got my email and stuff there as well. What I would love for as we shift into kind of the Q&A, it's basically where we're at. I'm gonna pop something in the chat, and I always like to get feedback on. So I do these sessions, what was valuable for everyone. So I've got a link that's going in the chat now. It's to a quick Google form. It might take 2 or 3 minutes at most, but I would love to hear from you what you found valuable. If we had more time, where would you go deeper? And then, I'll put together some key slides and maybe some additional content that I can send out after the session. So um, if you would fill out that form, I greatly appreciate perspectives. And so I'll give you a moment to click that in the chat. And then basically whenever you're ready, we can have people hop in with your key takeaways or any questions that you have. Okay. And Bev, if I missed anything or anyone else, feel free to hop in and keep me honest.
I think you're about as honest as you could be. Yeah, and folks, if you're less comfortable with grabbing things from chat, know that up at the top next to CCO growth rings are 3 dots. You can click those and they'll give you an option to save the chat. You can also, regardless of whether you want to fill out the form right now or later, you can click on the link that Jalaal put in the chat. It'll open up that form on your browser and you can take your time reflecting. Some folks say, you know what, I know some things right now, but I think if you even gave me another hour, I would come up with something different. So Jalal's
Absolutely.
going to be open to whatever feedback you've got for him, whenever that might come. And for coaches in training or coaches who don't use a lot of assessments, this is a cool opportunity to actually have a mini debrief and to experience an assessment you might not have experienced, and even possibly talk to Jalal about some of the other assessments he uses. He also uses the IDI and some other ones in his work. And if you're not familiar with those, I'm sure if it's a good timing for both of you, he'd be willing to chat with you about that too.
Absolutely. That's a really good call out, Bev. I appreciate that. I called out a couple that are my go-tos for this topic. Um, but I know a lot about it. I know a lot about a few assessments, and I'm familiar with a lot of them. So if you're like in general, like, can we talk about other ones too, even the ones that I couldn't debrief on? Like I said, I had a list of like 70 of them at one point. So um, there's a lot of things we could explore there too, and that's open to you as well.
Yeah, so we're having some great comments. Catherine Senna saying a takeaway is appreciating the accessibility and simplicity of your model and how to apply and coach around the results. And Sheila, so great to see you, Sheila. The inquiry and coaching questions and the core tool have her thinking about balancing opportunities. Samantha's saying takeaways making me think about where I need to shore up my leadership areas. Yeah, it gives us something to think about, right? And possibly something to think about, as Jalal mentioned, in personal life and leadership, community, work, volunteering. There are so many places that you're called to leadership or that you've actually already stepped in. I know we have former school board members on the call here. You saw a little eyebrow raise over at Michael Nelson. That would be her I'm calling out. Um, or folks that are really deep into leading within the schools they support, like Amanda. You know, there's just so much going on. Do any of you have questions for Jalal? Well, you know how to get in touch with him later, but is anything coming to mind right now?
I want to say thank you. This was not at all what I expected, and I enjoyed the heck out of it.
Oh, does that
Oh,
mean you
that's
might get? Go ahead, Jalal.
oh, that's great to hear. I mean, I'm curious, like what you might have been expecting, but either way, I'm just glad you enjoyed it.
Samantha, you don't have to tell.
Well,
Nope.
I've been coaching high performance teams for a very, very long time. And so my imagination was often this, coaching high performance teams, how to get teams to that high performance place, right? And this was the switch to leadership, and it was great. It was exactly what I needed. The universe spoke to me.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that.
I
Uh,
I also really appreciated the distinction between the emotional side and the strategic side, like the just sort of the parallels, like leveraging influence versus leveraging capacity or strengthening. Um, Ooh, I can't read my own handwriting. Strengthening something or strengthening vision. So just being able to see kind of like, ooh, I'm really strong on this side, but I doesn't always translate into how I put that into a vision statement or can articulate that particular thing. So it was really nice just to have the distinction there. That was very helpful to me.
I appreciate that. I've seen a couple more comments. So thank you for everyone in the chat speaking about like the model. And I saw another question here too about the Calendly link. So I will put that into the chat as well. Might even stop sharing my screen here so we could just probably could just talk for the rest of this
we can
time
hang
that
out
we have.
together. Yeah, so what I say to everybody, whether it's in a growth rings, a summit situation, whether it's in some, now Karen's recently introduced me to Braver Angels, whatever the case may be, most of the people that are on screen with you would welcome a contact. And so we talk a lot about CCO as supported community and connections. And Jalal is certainly doing that by giving us something deep to think about ourselves, the folks we coach, and something that's immediately applicable in my perspective. He's also brought us together in a safe, brave space to talk about things that are important and to hear from each other about what's important. And so please, if you're having like oh, I really liked what so-and-so said, I'd like to get to know them better. Really, really encourage you to reach out to that person, whether it's Jalal or anybody who's still with us or who had to leave a little earlier. We want this community to be robust and for it to further the profession and also just support you with some great learning and some encouragement for radical self-care these days when things are so unsettled and unsettling. So I know there's some questions out there about like, are we going to get these slides? Jalal, do you want to address?
Absolutely. Well, Bev, I like what you said too about, some people needed time to reflect. I'll say, when I've put in the survey link, I will send the slides and think about any common questions that come up and maybe even add, I sometimes create something extra if I think it'll be helpful. But yeah, if you let me know if you want slides from that survey, then I will make sure that you get them. Make sure you get the key slides and anything else I have to add tomorrow,
And
Friday, maybe midday. I'll say by tomorrow.
maybe Monday, give yourself some space, right? We're going to love it whenever it comes, Jalal, truly. And as far as CEUs, this is not formally um, approved for ICF CEUs, but there are often resource development CEUs where you claim the learning that you're going through. So keep track of it because this is still learning. And from my perspective, looking at some of those definitions over the years, this would be resource development, even though there's definitely some rich core competency threads through this. This is a resource development presentation at some of its most magical. So write it down. And when you're saying, ooh, I'm missing an hour and a half, you can go, oh, those growth rings. Yes, yes, yes. Anything anybody else wants to say before we close down for today?
Thank you so very
Okay.
much. This was an incredible, valuable use of my time, and I appreciate it.
Yes. Woot woot. We'll give a woot
Thank
woot.
you all. I enjoyed it. I appreciate you all's insight and engagement throughout. I had a lot of fun myself.
Okay, so I'm going to put you all on the spot too. A bunch of you have been to past summits. How many of you think he should apply to be a summit speaker? Yeah, I'm with you there. So, Jalal, we could talk about that another time. But everybody, please, if you haven't signed up to visit the summit this year on April 30th, the early bird pricing changes on January 31st. So you want to get in there for the lower prices. You'll start to see in February some broadcasts about March's growth ring with Kate Solis Silva. And we have some other ones coming up this year that are going to be great. And Jalal, I just want to say I'm feeling like super smug that I followed up on the recommendation to ask you to do a growth rings. And I am so, so grateful, my new friend, that you said yes. Thank you for this just wonderful space and time. I certainly did my heart good, and I think it did a lot of people's hearts good. So
Thank you. It's
everybody,
meant to be.
yes, I think so. Go well, be safe, stay strong, and we'll see you at the next growth rings.